I stood in the corner of the break room, clutching the same battered coffee mug I'd used for over 2 decades, Frank's etched in faded Sharpie across the side. Around me, laughter echoed from younger employees, people I'd helped train, mentored, even covered for more times than I could count. But today, none of them met my eyes. That was when I knew. My name is Frank Delaney. I'm 64 years old, and I've worked at Hayden Tech Industries for 29 years, 10 months, and 16 days. Nearly 3 decades of my life. Long enough to see 4 CEOs come and go. Long enough to remember when we still used fax machines. Long enough to have given this place everything but the last of my retirement. And that was the problem, wasn't it? I was 14 days away from my retirement benefits vesting fully. 14 days from the moment when the years of loyalty would finally pay off. Full pension, healthcare extensions, stock incentives, the kind of security I'd spent my entire working life chasing. My wife Janice and I had planned for it. A little cabin out near Asheville, fishing on the weekends. Finally time to breathe. We didn't live fancy, we just wanted peace. That dream kept me going. Until the knock came. "Frank, can we speak in my office?" My manager, Melissa Hart, barely looked up from her phone when she said it. Her voice clipped, professional, rehearsed. I followed her down the hallway I'd walked 1,000 times before. Every step was familiar, but my chest foreign. Tight, hollow, bracing. In her office sat HR. That was all I needed to see. "Due to restructuring," Melissa began, "your role has been deemed redundant." Redundant. They used that word like it didn't have teeth. "Effective immediately," HR added. "We'll offer you a severance package equivalent to 1 month's salary, provided you sign the standard non-disclosure and release agreement." My ears were ringing. "I'm 2 weeks from retirement," I said, my voice quieter than I wanted. 2 weeks. You think I don't know what this is? Melissa didn't blink. This decision was made by corporate. It's not personal. But it was personal. It was my life, my years, my blood pressure, my missed holidays, my aging knees from climbing up scaffolding back when the floors weren't even finished. I helped build this damn company, literally and metaphorically. And now they were erasing me with a signature and a month's pay. I walked out of that office with a folder full of paperwork and 1,000 thoughts crashing through my mind. They thought I'd just walk away, quietly, with my head down. Maybe they thought I was too old to fight back, that I wouldn't have the strength or the savvy. Maybe they didn't know who they were messing with, because I had a plan. You see, I'd spent nearly 30 years documenting everything, every system change, every process overhaul, every training module I'd created, every mistake I'd caught that saved the company thousands. And I had receipts, literal receipts too, email threads, memos, performance reviews that praised me up and down. I had value, and I could prove it. But that wasn't all. I also knew something they didn't know I knew, something that could change everything. You don't work somewhere for nearly 30 years without learning where the skeletons are buried. And Hayden Tech? It had a whole damned cemetery. Back in 2004, we had a massive server overhaul. It was a mess. Outsourced IT contractors who had no clue what they were doing, executives trying to impress shareholders by speeding up the transition, and a complete lack of oversight. Guess who stayed overnight for 3 days straight, with a thermos of gas station coffee and a folding chair just to keep the whole thing from imploding? Me. That's when I discovered something strange. A set of ghost employee files. At first I thought it was just test data, training accounts used for simulations. But no, these were payroll entries, monthly payments, health benefits listed. No office location, no login history. At the time I flagged it, I sent an email up the chain, got a curt, "We'll handle it" from the CFO back then, and I never heard a word after that. So I saved a backup, not because I thought I'd need it, just because something didn't sit right. Years passed, people changed, the CFO left, Systems were upgraded again and again, but I always kept a copy on an encrypted flash drive buried in my desk drawer. Turns out that flash drive was worth a whole lot more than my pension. That night, I went home, kissed Janice on the cheek, and told her to hold off on canceling the retirement party just yet. She looked at me confused, but I just smiled and said, "I'm not done." I spent the next day combing through that old data. What I found was worse than I remembered. Over a dozen ghost accounts. Fake employees drawing real salaries for nearly a decade. Millions paid out. No tax records. No corresponding ID numbers. It was quiet fraud, the kind that hides in plain sight until someone knows what they're looking for. And someone finally was. Me. I compiled everything. Screenshots, transaction logs, time-stamped entries. Then I started looking at who authorized the payments. And there it was. Melissa Hart's name. Not just once. Repeatedly. She'd signed off on files that never should have crossed her desk. I should have felt angry. I should have been shaking. But I felt something better. Clarity. They hadn't just fired me to avoid my retirement benefits. They fired me because I knew too much. Because I was one of the last dinosaurs who remembered the old systems. And because I still had the keys to the kingdom. But they made one mistake. They thought I'd go quietly. I didn't. I sent an anonymous tip to the company's internal audit team. I attached a compressed folder with enough documentation to start an investigation that would take months to unravel. Then I BCC'd a few people I knew in legal, former coworkers who owed me favors. Finally, I sent one, just one, to the Department of Labor. No message, just the evidence. Let the files speak for themselves. Within 48 hours, the quiet hum of the company started turning into a buzz. HR started poking around. Melissa's office door stayed closed most of the day. The next morning, I got a call. Not from her, but from the interim VP of operations. "Frank, we may have made a mistake." I just sipped my coffee. "That's so?" "We'd like to invite you back on a consulting basis. Help us sort through some irregularities." Consulting. That was rich. Now they wanted to pay me double my old rate to clean up the mess they'd created and tried to bury with my termination. But I wasn't done. I didn't say yes to their offer right away. No, that would have been too easy. I let that VP sweat a little. Told him I'd think about it. Truth is, I already had. I'd spent 29 years playing by someone else's rules, showing up early, staying late, training new hires who got promoted before me, covering shifts for managers who took credit for my work. Always the team player. Always dependable Frank. But dependable Frank was gone. And strategic Frank had just stepped into the light. I called my attorney, an old college buddy who owed me for bailing him out of a DUI back in the 80s. I laid out the situation. How I'd been terminated days before my full benefits vested, how I'd uncovered fraudulent activity, and how they were now trying to bring me back under the table to contain the fallout. He whistled low through the phone. "Frank, this is leverage. Nuclear-grade leverage." Together we drafted a response to Hayden Tech. Not a yes, not a maybe, a proposal. A formal consulting contract, 6 months minimum, at triple my old hourly rate. A clause reinstating my original position retroactively for the full 30 years, granting me the pension and benefits I'd been cheated out of. Full non-disclosure from them regarding my involvement in the audit. And lastly, a quiet retirement at the end of the contract with a glowing farewell memo from the board. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about dignity. About reclaiming every ounce of self-worth they'd tried to strip away with a pink slip and a sterile HR script. They called the next morning. The VP's voice cracked a little when he said, "We've reviewed your proposal, and under the circumstances, we're willing to move forward." "Under the circumstances," I repeated, almost laughing. "You mean the ones you created?" There was a pause. "We just want to make things right, Mr. Delaney." "Then we're in agreement," I said. "I start Monday." Click. I looked over at Janice, who was watching from the doorway with a mix of pride and disbelief. "You really did it," she said. "I'm not done yet," I replied. "But we're close." That Monday, I walked back into Hayden Tech wearing the same pressed shirt I'd worn the day of my firing. Let them see that full circle. Heads turned. Some nodded, a few whispered. Melissa's office was dark. She wasn't coming back. Word had gotten out about irregularities in her division. The whispers grew legs and turned into rumors. The rumors turned into emails. HR confirmed she'd been placed on indefinite leave, pending an investigation. I heard she eventually resigned to pursue other opportunities. Funny how that works. I spent the next 4 months cleaning up their mess, tracing years of financial discrepancies, restoring systems they didn't even know were compromised, and quietly training a new internal audit manager to make sure it didn't happen again. And the whole time, I got paid more than I'd ever made in my life. At 64 years old, I was finally being compensated for my value. Not just my labor, but my knowledge, my consistency, my integrity. It shouldn't have taken a scandal to get that recognition. But if that's what it took, so be it. Because I wasn't just working for a paycheck anymore. I was writing my exit on my own terms. By the 5th month of my consulting contract, the atmosphere at Hayden Tech had changed. People looked at me differently. The same younger employees who once brushed me off as that old guy in facilities ops now knocked on my door for advice. The IT team, who'd barely nodded at me before, invited me to weekly stand-ups. Even the interns started saying things like, "Mr. Delaney, can you review this process for us?" Mr. Delaney, not Frank from the basement, not the old-timer. Respect. Earned the hard way. It was odd, really. I didn't have a fancy title anymore. No direct reports, no corner office. But my influence had grown tenfold. Why? Because I was the only one in the building with nothing to lose and everything to say. And people finally started to listen. And the best part? I was writing the training manual for my replacement. That was my idea. I told the VP, if you really want to make this right, let me build a legacy here. Don't just patch the damage, teach someone how not to repeat it. He agreed. So I designed a 6-week training program, built from the ground up. Not just how to run the operation systems, but how to run them with ethics, transparency, and accountability. I taught them how to audit, how to question suspicious patterns, how to push back on bad leadership without losing their job. And on the final day of training, I walked into the boardroom, this time not as an employee or even a consultant, but as a guest speaker at my own farewell. They'd arranged a luncheon, full spread, name placards, even a custom cake with "Thank you, Frank" written in blue icing. There was applause, speeches. Someone from finance tried to give me a plaque shaped like the Hayden Tech logo. I declined it politely and handed them something instead. A letter. One I'd written the night before. In it, I didn't just say thank you. I told the truth. I talked about what it meant to work somewhere for 30 years and nearly walk away with nothing. I talked about loyalty and how it's a two-way street. I talked about how dangerous it is when companies value cost-cutting over character, and how nearly every bad decision Hayden Tech had made started with people at the top forgetting who built the foundation beneath them. And then I thanked them. Yes, thanked them for giving me the opportunity to walk away stronger than I'd ever imagined. You taught me, I wrote, that no matter how loyal you are to a company, your greatest obligation is to yourself. I left that room with a standing ovation. But I didn't need it. Because the real victory wasn't in applause. It was in knowing I'd taken the blow they dealt me and turned it into a blueprint for everyone watching. After the luncheon, I didn't go back to my office. I didn't pack up any boxes or grab a farewell gift. I walked straight to the parking garage, climbed into my old Chevy Silverado, and sat for a moment. No emails to check, no meetings to prep for. No more pretending to be grateful for crumbs while the suits dined upstairs. It was over, and yet it felt like something new had just begun. I pulled out of the Hayden Tech lot for the last time and drove home, not to sulk or reflect, but to surprise Janice. She was out back in the garden, tending to her tomato plants, when she heard the gate open. "Back already?" she said. I held up the envelope, my signed retirement contract, with full pension and benefits intact. She dropped the gardening shears. "Are you serious?" "As a heart attack," I said, laughing. She ran over and threw her arms around me. "You did it. You really did it." We both cried, right there in the backyard. Not because of the money or even the vindication, but because the future we thought we'd lost was back in our hands. And this time, it was ours completely. We spent the next month preparing for our new life. We sold the house we'd raised our kids in, finally bought that little cabin in Asheville, and adopted a senior rescue dog named Gus, who only had 3 teeth but the heart of a lion. I started woodworking again. Not because I had to, but because I loved it. Janice took up painting. Together, we filled our days with simple pleasures: sunrises over the Blue Ridge Mountains, fresh pies from the farmer's market, and long walks through trails I never had time for before. Funny thing is, I got a call from Hayden Tech 2 weeks after my farewell. Not from the board, not from HR. From one of the interns I'd trained. "Mr. Delaney," she said nervously, "I just wanted to thank you. You taught me more in 6 weeks than I've learned in 4 years of business school. About integrity, about noticing the small things that don't add up." That call hit different. Because that was the point all along, wasn't it? It wasn't just about exposing fraud or getting my pension back. It was about showing the people behind me that their value doesn't come from a title or tenure. It comes from their principles, their actions, and how they protect themselves in a world that's often eager to strip them of both. Janice always said I was a quiet man. And she wasn't wrong. I never made waves, never caused trouble. But when they pushed me, I didn't just push back. I made sure no one could ever do what they did to me, to someone else. Because if they thought I was just going to fade into retirement quietly after 29 years of sacrifice, they never really knew me. But now, the world will. I used to believe that loyalty was the highest virtue you could bring to your job. That if you just kept your head down, did the work, showed up early and stayed late, the world would eventually reward you. But now I understand something much more important. Loyalty means nothing to people who see you as disposable. In the end, it wasn't my years of service that protected me. It was my decision to stop being silent. To stop waiting for validation from people who only noticed me when they needed something done for cheap, quietly, and without credit. And I know I'm not the only one. There are thousands, millions of people like me. People who gave the best years of their lives to companies that would cut them loose in a second to boost a quarterly report. People who were told to be grateful for the opportunity, while watching less experienced, louder, younger employees leapfrog ahead because they played politics better than they did the job. Well, I've got news for them. You can't fire experience. You can't erase integrity. And you sure as hell can't silence someone who's got nothing left to lose. Since my retirement, I've started something new. Not a business, not a side hustle, a community. It began with a simple blog. Retired, not replaced. I wrote about my experience, how I uncovered the fraud, how I got justice, and how I walked away stronger. I figured maybe a handful of folks would read it. Instead, tens of thousands did. Emails poured in, stories just like mine. Older workers being pushed out weeks before their pensions kicked in. Women being told their roles were redundant after training their replacements. Veterans with decades of field knowledge cut loose for being too expensive. It lit a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. So I turned the blog into a network. A resource hub, a support line. I connected employment attorneys with folks being squeezed out, helped build guides on how to document and protect yourself before corporate comes knocking. And more than anything, I told them they weren't crazy, they weren't overreacting, they were being targeted, and they weren't alone. It started with one man who refused to go quietly. But now, it's a movement of people demanding better, demanding respect, and reclaiming their worth. So yeah, they fired me just days before my retirement benefits kicked in. But I didn't just get those benefits back. I got my voice back. I got my future back. And I used it to help others protect theirs. So the next time a boss thinks they can play games with someone's livelihood to save a few bucks, I hope they remember my name, Frank Delaney, age 64. Laid off, pushed out, and louder than ever.